Welcome back to the podcast. This week's guest is Simon Mason. Simon Mason is the frontman of the Hightown Pirates. We spoke about his band, plus we spoke about his early life growing up, becoming one of the key players in Britpop, and his descent into drug addiction, which lasted the best part of 2 decades. And then we spoke about how he got clean and how he's turned his life around and he's back on track. We spoke about all this, and then at the end, Simon picked his heroes to come for dinner. Hope you all enjoy the podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks. Right, thank you very much, Simon Mason. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast. What I would say about you is you're an author, a frontman in a band, and a recovering drug addict, amongst lots of other things.
Amongst other things, I check all those 3 boxes. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. In no particular order.
My guess, if you just kind of start off with your early life growing up and just tell us how that was and how that kind of shaped you.
Well, how did that shape me? So I'm 54 in August, and when I've just said that, I've just gone, fucking hell. Getting on a bit, and the reason that that actually sort of I laugh when I say it is I don't know how you're supposed to feel in your mid. I don't feel like when I was a kid, 54 was ancient. You know, people's parents still dressed like it was the 1940s when they were 54 in the 70s. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of 54 was very different. I think people's lives had been much harder. You know, my memories of people in their 50s when I was a kid was, you know, they'd fought in a war. Oh, those people. So my childhood, up until, well, the first 5 years were okay. The first 5 or 6 years were all right, and then there was a lot of death, a lot of family members. It got quite dark quite quickly, Martin, I guess is what I'm saying. We had my sister and I had mum and dad. We grew up in a little seaside town called Weston-super-Mare, which is in Somerset, and you know, there's worse places to grow up. It was very white. It was very normal, really. You know, I remember the first time I watched that movie, Twin Towns, and they described Swansea as the graveyard of ambition. I thought, well, they've never fucking been to Weston-super-Mare. Clearly, these two. So there were, you know, really early years. My sister and I, we lost our aunt, my dad's sister, who was like another mum to us. She committed suicide. My best friend, one of my best friends at school when I was 10, dropped dead in front of me. That was quite traumatic. I don't want to gloss over it too much, but you know, my father died when I was 11 suddenly. My grandfather, who'd come to live with us, he died 18 months after that. I was in a Catholic boarding school for 5 years, most of which I was subject of sexual abuse, physical bullying, psychological bullying. It's cheerful, isn't it? This. Good morning, everyone. But you asked the question, and that's the reality of it. You know, the reality, unfortunately for me, was it was shit. Right. And the things that weren't shit, were in fact, I listened to this morning, just as I was kind of getting ready. I was having a cup of tea. I was listening to the Jam on vinyl. You know, that's how I listen to music again these days. And that was the thing that wasn't shit, or maybe that was the thing that made the stuff that was shit bearable. Was music. I got into music really young. I had a friend of mine at school who was a few years older than me. A few months after my my dad died, and he came into my room one night with a TDK C90 cassette compilation tape. And on that, and I tell this story all the time because it changed my life. You know, it was as pivotal and as life changing as my dad dying or any of that stuff. You know, and this cassette that Martin Johnson, who's my mate to this day, and I'll give him a shout out now. You know, the Clash and the Jam and the Who and the Pistols and the Ruts and the Specials and all that kind of stuff on this cassette. And you know, I was 11 years old. I used the word traumatized. I wouldn't have known that at the time, but you know, with the benefit of hindsight, I was traumatized. I was struggling to cope with life, with the grief, with the loss, with the abuse. And I had this cassette, and I had this portal to another world, you know, of music, and
some sort of escape.
It was a lifeboat, yeah, it was absolutely. So, you know, I just, like I said, I've been buying vinyl like crazy again. My wife doesn't listen to this, but I've been buying a little bit of vinyl recently. Let's put it like that. And I got this import 4-track EP 12-inch with Start and Eton Rifles and That's Entertainment and Going Underground on it, and I just blasted it out really loud this morning before I logged on, and I go back to being that 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid again, and I know every word still.
Yeah.
And I always will, because that was my first love. You know, that was my first love. The Jam were my first love. You never forget your first love, whether it's a girl or a band or a football team or whatever it is. And yeah, so that's a fairly long-winded answer to your question. It was pretty shit, and then there was music, and then there was something that helped me survive.
Right. So, what was school like then? What the kind of school take a back seat then?
So, for reasons I've never really understood, well, I could probably make an educated guess, but my mum thought it was a good idea, if possible, to send me off to a boarding school. We didn't have any money. Just want to make a point of saying that. It wasn't like, you know, a posh, it wasn't Eton, I'll tell you that much. What it was, you know, a Catholic boarding school with day pupils, some of whose parents had probably made a few quid. There were like army brats there, you know, whose parents were stationed in Germany or Singapore or whatever. There was a lot of kids from Hong Kong, kids from all over the world, all sort of thrown together in this sort of, you know, education in a way that if I thought my daughter, you know, who's 13, if I thought that's what her education was like, I'd have something to say about it, you know.
Yeah.
Corporal punishment, a very a lot of hypocrisy, you know, and I don't want to go on a sort of, you know, anti-religious rant, you know, but it wasn't good, you know, it wasn't good, and there was a lot of collusion, there was a lot of paedophilia within, you know, the church. I mean, I'm not saying anything that isn't, you know, public knowledge. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, myself and other kids were caught up in all that. I was trying to explain to my daughter the other day, like, what school was like for me. So we had a teacher that used to smoke ciggies in the classroom. Oh yeah, no, you laugh. Can you imagine saying that now to a kid now? My teacher used to smoke fucking tabs whilst he was teaching the lesson, and that's the school I went to. It stopped, but he still smoked in the school corridors. We all smoked, you know, break time at school at like 11 o'clock. There'd be like 200 kids all legging it up the path to, you know, to get out of sight of the school, smoking, having a cig, talking about whatever, you know, football or music, and then going back to class. And it was, I suppose, the only education I got was how to survive.
Right. Right, I'm going to just pause a wee second, just because. Right. Yeah, so
So, you know, we're talking, I started secondary school in 1979, right? And so all that stuff that I spoke about had happened prior to that or during that time. And, you know, the world was, well, I say the world was a very different place, but, you know, currently it feels like parts of the world want to go back to that time. You know, I was a member of CND when I was 12.
Right.
Because my friends and I were frightened that we were all going to get nuked. You know, the music that I listened to, you know, the Jam in particular and the Style Council, you know, was heavily politicized.
Mm-hmm.
So although obviously we didn't have the internet and computers, we had the NME and whatever, you know, was written on the back of a Jam single or a Style Council single or whatever, you know, Joe Strummer was talking about in print, in the music press. That's where I got my information from. And
that's the thing as well with stuff like that. I think you kind of take more interest in your heroes at that point, like the people that you look up to. You're gonna take on what they say better than you are a guy on the news.
For sure. So on the, you know, on the sleeve of the Jam album, Sound Effects, on the inside at the back, there's a quote by the poet Shelley, you know, Rise Like Lions. It's a poem by Shelley. I remember reading it thinking, they haven't fucking shown me this in school. We're reading some bollocks about fucking around the, you know, whatever. So just something that made no sense to me. That was written 300, you know, but so I remember looking on that album and thinking, well, I'm going to go and check that out and go into the library at school and getting a book of poetry by Shelley. And what they, you know, everything I wore was informed by, you know, the posters on my wall, really. And that's not a bad thing. That's how it should be, I think, when you're a teenager. Thankfully, I took my fashion hints from pop stars and not football players.
Exactly. You be talking about the mullet.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have had one of them Craig Johnson sort of curly perms or something, or a fucking muzzy, but as soon as I could. An Ian Rush moustache, yeah.
So, what were your ambitions then? Obviously, if you were struggling with school and things like that, what was your hopes to be growing up?
I didn't have any.
Just
Martin. I mean, as tragic as that sounds, I remember sitting in a careers advice lecture or whatever at school, and they said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I just want to get out of here, mate. I just want to leave here. I don't, you know, I just want to go away." I had none. I've just finished writing a song about that period of my life, and I've never written a song about that period of my life. I don't know why it's taken me this long, but it has. And there's a line in it where I've written, and they never gave us anything or nothing we could use. They made a bonfire of our dreams, and then they lit the fuse. That's really where I was at. You know, I was angry, traumatized. I didn't know, you know, I knew the anger. I understood the anger. But words like traumatized weren't in my vocabulary, and you know, unfortunately, one of the MO kind of things of paedophilia and abuse is that, you know, your guilt and shame is heaped upon the child. The fact you couldn't talk to anybody about this, you know what I mean? It was all a secret.
Yeah.
So I was like a 15-year-old kid with a load of really dark secrets and a lot of shame, none of which was my fault. On top of the trauma of losing my dad, who was my hero. You know, my old man, if he was alive today, he had me when he was quite, you know, relatively late in life. He was born in 1922, so he'd be 100 this year. He'd be 100 next month, in fact, March the 20th. And he was a pilot during the Second World War. So he was a hero, you know. I mean, he is our hero, you know, not just my hero. I'd say this all the time. Those young men, you know, much the same as the young men that are fucking dying in Ukraine now. They have no choice about it, you know, conscripts or whatever, or they signed up. So he was my hero. So losing him, aged 11, created a huge trauma and a huge sadness. And of course, to then be subjected to the kind of stuff that happened at school, when I discovered alcohol, cigarettes, and other drugs, it was a fucking relief, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to explain that. I mean, if people are still listening, and that you could probably see why those things. You know, you say, did I have an ambition? I didn't know it. My ambition was to not feel how I felt. You know, was to change how I felt by whatever means necessary. So I always feel the need. I always feel the need to qualify this early on as well, because the other thing in my life at that time and to this day that gave me hope was Liverpool Football Club. Now, whilst the people are going, hang on a minute, he sounds like a Cockney. What's he doing supporting them? About 3 months after my dad died, my mum, who was originally from Coventry, which was where I was in school, had a cousin, and he took me to a game of football. He took me to see Coventry City at the old Highfield Road against Liverpool. And he was a season ticket holder for Cov City. And I'd never been to a game before. My dad hadn't taken me. He passed away. So I kind of followed football a little bit from a distance, but I didn't support anybody. My dad never supported anybody. He was a cricket man, really. So I go to this game with this relative who I'd met him. That's the only time I ever met him. I never saw him again. And Coventry City win the game 1-0. And he turns to me and he's like, so that's it, you're a sky blue now. And I remember this like it was yesterday. It was January 1980, so a fucking long time ago. I remember looking at the away end, and that was in the days when Liverpool would, and other clubs would routinely take 10,000 fans away to an away game. You know, you just jib it in. And it was just a sea of red and white and flags and people singing songs, and even though the game was lost, and I just went, I want a bit of that. I want a bit of that. That was it. I fell in love with Liverpool Football Club. So, you know, that was it. You can't help who you fall in love with, right? And and as soon as I was old enough, and as soon as I'd left home and ran away to London, I started to go and watch them in the 80s in London at away games, and I go and watch them to this day, and it's just another thing in my life that, you know, back then that was like every Saturday at, you know, when the full-time scores were like, yes, it was a victory. You know, there was something good happened. It was almost guaranteed. Liverpool 7, Man United 0, you know, or whatever. So those things started to run in tandem. So I had no ambitions, but I had music and I had football. And
what more do you need?
Well, precisely. Particularly when you've got the Liverpool team of the early 80s, and then, you know, after the Jam split, and I struggled with the Style Council for a little while. It was a bit of a swerve from Weller, but you know, now I kind of get it in a way. In fact, I was playing Head Start for Happiness this morning, and as I was walking my dog in my earphones, and I was grinning like a fucking idiot. You know, I mean, it's like, what's a fucking song?
Yeah,
you know, uplifting and joyful.
I'm pretty much the same with that, because obviously I'm early 40s, so I'm a bit younger than you. I got into the Jam when I was at school, and my sister would have been listening to Style Council, but I didn't like any 80s music back then, and it's maybe in the last 10 years that I've got into the Style Council, and once you get it, you do get it, didn't you?
Yeah. But I see, not just him, I mean, but, you know, artists that challenge their audience. I mean, you know, we're going to talk about heroes later on, and he's on my list. But I haven't decided whether I'm going to invite him over tea yet, because there's someone else that's on the list. It's a toss-up. But say what you like about Paul Weller is that he's constantly tried to do something different.
Yeah.
You know, he could have stayed with the Jam. They were, you know, they slayed all that was in front of them. They were number one. You know, and he didn't. And that's inspiring, I think. At the time, it wasn't inspiring. At the time, it was devastating.
Yeah.
But again,
this is the thing as well, because he was a young boy as well, and he
24 split the Jam 24, I think it was. Crazy, yeah.
He had 24 to see that it was time to change.
Yeah.
Every day else was heartbroken, but he knew what he had to change and move on and evolve.
A man of integrity, you know. Anyway, so here we are. It's 1984. What happens next? I leave school.
So what happened then? Were you at this point? Were you playing in bands or anything like that? Was there any?
No, you know, when you ask me what were my ambitions, and I say I had none. I had none. I had no ambitions. I had no belief in myself to really do anything. I think that had been stripped away from me. You know, there was no guiding hand. There was no. I have a very distant relationship from my own mother, unfortunately. God bless her. I had no one saying you might want to do this. You know, my mum had remarried, and I had an authoritarian stepdad who was like, "You should join the army." And I was like, "All right, then, I'll fucking join the army." And I went and almost joined the army, and would have joined the army had I not, on the train to the selection weekend at Sutton Coldfield, decided to take loads of speed and drink about 20 cans of Stella. And got halfway to Sutton Coldfield and just had a moment of clarity and went, "What the fuck am I doing? I don't want to join the army." So what you like about Stella and amphetamine, sometimes they do actually kind of help you make a proper decision. I was lost, Martin. You know, the truth is I was a lost young man. I didn't want to stay in Weston-super-Mare. I ran away to London when I was 17, literally just packed a bag, got on a train, popped up in Soho, and again, I remember standing on the corner of Shaftesbury Avenue and I think Frith Street or Greek Street in the heart of Soho. Again, off my tits on speed, you know, just got off a train from this little parochial seaside town where nothing was ever going to happen, and looking at what was going on in Soho in London in 1986 and thinking, this is fucking amazing. You know, this is amazing. There's more stuff's going to happen in the next 5 minutes here than in the next 50 years where I come from. I knew that intuitively. It wasn't like an intellectual thing. It was like, maybe it was the speed, I don't know. But so yeah, I came to London, and what did I do? I just fucking took drugs and drank. Right.
Where were you staying? Were you sleeping rough? Or?
So I did a bit of rough sleeping, not for very long, a few weeks on and off, hostels and whatever. And then I ended up in Kilburn in North London, in the kind of Irish community up there, which is a great place to drink, you know. I remember sitting in a pub called the Union in Kilburn with my flatmate, and you know, it was during the Troubles, and they were still doing collections for the cause. You know, people would come around with buckets. I didn't have a clue what the fucking cause was. That's how naive I was. I remember this guy passing the bucket. He put money in for the cause, and I just went, "I'm on a dole, mate." Not really fucking. So we left the pub. You know, my mate was like, "We're leaving the pub," but you know, this was all. I don't know, even the dole office in the 80s was an adventure. Going to sign on every couple of weeks in Kilburn in the mid-late 80s with fucking, because it was, you'd walk in and it was like a scene out of a film. You know, there were just all sorts of people in there.
Yeah.
Fucking pissing on the stairs, drinking, you know, fucking smoking spliffs, whatever. You know, imagine working there in the 80s, you know, like sat behind a bulletproof piece of glass with someone screaming at you all day, "Where's my fucking money?" Yeah, it was mad. It was crazy. But then, kind of out of nowhere, I had what Cockneys call a bit of a touch, and I got 500 quid from somewhere, which in 1986 was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money, actually. And I bought a one-way ticket to New York, and I flew to America. Just literally, I got this money, and 48 hours later, I'd made this decision that I was going to go to America and see what that was all about. Do you remember Rick Mayall's first comedy character, Kevin Turvey? Do you remember that? Off the telly. Check it out afterwards, you like it. So Rick Mayall, God bless him, and I'm thinking about him because today would have been his birthday.
Right.
One of his first comedy characters was this character called Kevin Turvey. He was like a guy from the Midlands. He was a bit like Rick from The Young Ones, really, but with a Brummie accent. And Kevin Turvey used to investigate stuff. So in a very I mean, some people listening to this might know what I'm talking about, but anyway, so in a very Kevin Turvey kind of way, my 17-year-old brain was like, I'm going to go and investigate America on a one-way ticket with no money, really. And that's what I did.
Wow. And was that in Thornbury Style and Speed?
Yeah, totally. Everything was. Yeah. Everything at that time was you know, as a result of you know, first thing I'd do in the morning was skin up and make a joint and drink something and get myself together and then make a series of bad decisions that never seemed that bad because, you know, so I ended up on the West Coast in Los Angeles in October '86, and I was there for nearly 2 years on and off, and all those sort of crazy decisions, adolescent decisions that we all make, not all maybe, that a lot of us make when we're young, got sort of turned up a notch or two because I'm in LA, you know, and it's just like, it's Los Angeles. And so, you know, the drugs were different. Mm-hmm. The consequences are different. People have got fucking guns. Who knew? You know what I mean? There were people, I didn't fucking know. I really genuinely didn't know that a lot of people that were out and about at 3 o'clock in the morning in my neighborhood in Venice Beach in Los Angeles in 1986 were out of their mind on crack and had a gun. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I soon found out.
So you get into some scrapes there then?
I was put in jail 4 times for like long weekends, I think a week, and because, you know, the sort of stuff that in Kilburn you wouldn't have got put in jail, you know, like in the nick for. You might have been like given a slap by the copper and whatever, but you wouldn't have been arrested for it. But they fucking love arresting people in America, don't they? It's like it's a revenue stream for them. So and I got involved with crack cocaine, which, as anyone with half a brain will tell you, is not a good idea and never has a happy ending.
No.
And so I had 2 years of that over there, and just more drugs, Martin. You know, lots of really strong acid and a lot of drinking and crack and normal cocaine, and you know, guess what? It didn't end well, and I got shot at twice, I think.
Fuck's sake.
I got put in the jail a few times, and eventually, thank God, I managed to leave. Really, you know, the last few months I was there, I sold whatever possessions I'd accumulated, and I got on a plane and I went back to Weston-super-Mare because I didn't have anywhere else to go, to my mum's, because, you know, ultimately, I guess, you know, that's what you do. And I remember going to see the family. I said a family doctor. It sounded like it was the doctor that I was registered with, and just being so depressed. I mean, I was depressed because I'd been on a sort of 2-year drugs bender. Mm-hmm. I was depressed because my dreams of whatever I thought I was doing in LA hadn't worked out. I did a bit of acting and a bit of extra work, and I was in a few films and all that sort of stuff. I was in The Naked Gun, Blink and You Miss Me, but and it was all done completely illegally, by the way. It was just, and there was loads of lads over there. So the World Cup was in Mexico, you know, in '86. Yeah. So there was loads of lads from England there. There was loads of Scottish lads there, and there were lots of people that had fled Thatcher's Britain. You know, lots of lads from up north, loads of Scousers and Manx and Glaswegians. And it was kind of like being an Auf Wiedersehen pet, but in LA, you know, with a better climate. Everyone was working on building sites. And it was, you know what, it was fucking great. Most of it was great. It was a crazy couple of years. You know, it wasn't just me sat there smoking crack for 2 years. That was a bit of it. But it was life-changing in a ways that I started to realise, you know, some truths about the world, and to understand that the term we use now is white privilege, but I had that. just because I was white, you know, when I consider what I was up to.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I got put in the jail, it was full of black people who'd done the same thing, and they weren't going anywhere. You know, they were just. So it was part. It was.
How did like see with that there? What was it like? Did you need to pay bail to get out or what?
Yeah, I had someone twice come and bail me out. What really there was this one incident where I got nicked on a Friday afternoon. I was in a stolen car that I knew it was stolen. I bought it off someone, but you know, and I got nicked with an ounce of pot under the front seat in a stolen car on a Friday afternoon. And that's so you're put in the they call it the tank in LA, you know, for the weekend. So it's like every police station has its own prison cells, and I got thrown in there. And they're like, we'll deal with you next week in court, you know, unless you can get bail. And no one's going to give bail to me. It's one of the most eye-opening things that I've ever seen to this day. So I get put in the prison cell, and it's about 50 foot long and about 20 foot wide. And there's a row of telephones on the wall, on one wall. And on the other wall, there's a row of toilets, cubicles, but with no door. So you've got your Crips down one end, their gang. Bloods in the other corner, the Mexicans in another corner, a couple of people that I couldn't tell what race they were. They were so fucked from drugs, you know, I don't know whether they were white or black, or, you know, they were just fucking lying on the floor looking like they were half dead. And me, this sort of like 19-year-old fucking white kid.
That's a dodgy situation, man.
Thinking, how the fuck did this happen? You know, generally, how did it? I mean, I know now what happened. It happened because I was fucking in a stolen car trying to buy drugs. But anyway, I got approached by this big fella comes kind of trotting over, and he just spoke to me. They take everything off you apart from your money, and they take your laces out your shoes so you can't strangle yourself or anyone else, anything that could be a weapon. But you could keep your cigarettes and your money. It was really bizarre. Anyway, this fella comes up to me, and once he figures out that I'm English and I'm not like the enemy, I'm not like white America, he's like, you need to come meet my buddies, man, hang with them. So I just spent the whole weekend getting stoned in this fucking prison cell with these black dudes that just looked after me. They're like, you got to be with somebody in here, you can't be a lone operator, dude, you know. Do you have black folk? They didn't use that word, but I won't use the word, you know, do you have black people in England? And I'm like, yeah, of course, you know. And it was just another learning curve. I mean, not one that I'd wish anyone else to experience, but
yeah,
you know, started to see how the world works a little bit. Yeah, they got me bail, and I skipped bail. You know, I left America basically. I'm still banned to this day. But anyway, there's other places to go. So all this stuff, Martin, was all soundtracked still, you know, by music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was going to see bands. I mean, here's one that probably you wouldn't expect, but I went to see the Grateful Dead a couple of times.
Right.
Just because my mate had a ticket. I was like, they're like some hippie band from the 60s, right? I mean, it was amazing. It's incredible. They played for like 3 hours. I mean, 2 hours of that was a guitar solo, but there was just a load of people all taking, and the reason I mentioned that is because it kind of feeds into what happens next, actually. So about a month before I left California or left America, I go and see the Grateful Dead at Long Beach Arena. And I don't know, there's 20,000 people there. And they're all taking psychedelic drugs. People are selling this thing called ecstasy, which I was like, I've never heard of that. I don't know what this is. 1988, by the way, in LA. People are taking a lot of acid, smoking a lot of weed, all sorts of weird stuff, doing nitrous balloons and everything. And the gig's like 3 hours long, and then the party in the car park after the show goes on all night.
Right.
And I remember thinking, this is amazing. This is like I've never seen anything like this. People staying up all night listening to strange music, sounded strange to me, taking loads of drugs. How bizarre. Wow, you know, I'm really going to miss that when I leave California. And of course, I come back to England and it's 1988 and becomes 1989. And what happens?
Yeah. So, I always thought that ecstasy started off in Europe.
I thought
no, Alexander Shulgin was a Californian. I mean, he's still alive. You know, he was in the way that Timothy Leary, I suppose, in the 60s was the poster boy for LSD. Ecstasy was, I believe, someone can tweet me and tell me I'm wrong, synthesized in America by this guy called Shulgin. And, you know, like all other drugs like that, once the government decided they didn't have much use for it, you know, it went underground, and it was still legal for a long time in America. Anyway, I didn't partake there, but 18 months later, I'm back in England, and I'm back in London, and then I'm at Glastonbury, and then I meet Bez from the Happy Mondays.
So
you can guess what happened next, maybe.
So, what happened next?
Well, funny you should ask. So I'd kind of I'd moved to London. I'd spent a few months in Weston-super-Mare, long enough to just kind of realise that, you know, what I already knew, that I didn't want to stay there, and I came back to London, and I'd been to Glastonbury for the first time in '86. That was a life-changing moment for sure. One of the best gigs I've ever seen in my life to this day, and where I got the title of my book from, Too High, Too Far, Too Soon, from the Waterboys song The Whole of the Moon. I would urge anybody who likes music with more soul than you can shake a fucking soulful stick at, and passion and energy, to go on YouTube and type in Waterboys Glastonbury 1986. It is one of the most remarkable concerts by any band that has ever existed, ever. And I know that's a ridiculous thing to say, but it was. And it was actually recorded by Radio 1 or Radio 2 in concert. So it's a really good quality recording you can listen to on YouTube. It's a remarkable gig. And I think it was the first time in my life, so I was like 17, 18 in '86. This was before I'd gone to America, that I started to think, I'd quite like to do something like that, you know, like everyone does. Right? It'd be great being a rock star, wouldn't it? Fucking lovely. You get. Anyway, a few years later, I was back there in, do you know what, was it 91, 90? I don't know. Anyway, I got a job working at Glastonbury. I say work, I use the term loosely. But it had given me an access all areas pass. And essentially what happened was I met Bez from the Happy Mondays, who were not headlining, but they were certainly high up the bill that year. So maybe it was 91, actually, I don't know. The Happy Mondays tour bus was like a scene that he took me on his tour bus, and I'd kind of never seen anything like it, to be honest with you. It was fucking carnage in there. And they had arrived, and they bought, the Mondays had bought their own laminating, like pass laminating machine with them. So all their mates, as soon as they got their passes, they just photocopied them and laminated them. And they were, so it was just loads of Manx backstage selling pills, basically. And it was, Bez said to me, listen, can you get us, basically he was asking for something that someone else needed, that you, how can I put it, you wouldn't mention it in polite conversation. Yeah, it was a substance that has got a stigma to it, that, you know, you just don't talk about it. And someone within their group needed some. How about that? And I knew where I could get it. So I took Bez off to the other side of the Glastonbury Festival. I had a motorbike which I'd hired off someone, and I drove him up there and sorted all that out for him and them. And then in return, they gave me a bag of pills and went, go and sell them if you want. And I did. And that was the first time, really, I had got engaged in doing that. I won't say for a living, because it wasn't for a living, you know, but I knew someone that had some substances, and I knew lots of people that wanted those substances, and I was a one-man drug dustbin. So I figured, my stupid brain went, well, if I get those people what that person's got, I can get a bit for myself, and it's happy days. I genuinely never, on my daughter's life, never thought it was some scheme to make money. Never saw it like that.
No, I think you're just at that point. You're just happy to have enough for yourself, aren't you? That's what it is. It's no.
Well, I was fairly.
That. Yeah, I don't think you can make that decision to be making money.
No, I think you have to be quite a ruthless individual to do that. You know, certainly you can't be. If you take drugs yourself and think you're going to make money selling drugs, then you're fucking, like I did at some point. You're stupid. You know, it's not going to happen. But you know, and also, I was quite evangelical about ecstasy, you know, like a lot of us were at the time, because I saw no harm in it. I thought it was a remarkable substance that, you know, if it can stop football hooligans from slapping fuck out of each other on a Saturday, then do you know what? But it did do that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Old Firm games were a big love fest and they were all like cuddling each other on the halfway line, but
no, definitely not. But most other games, aye.
But you know what I mean? It certainly changed stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was caught up in it, like hundreds of thousands, millions of people were at that time.
Yeah. So from Bez, then, what happened for there? You were going to Glastonbury every year, weren't you?
Yeah.
This is
so I made
stall.
I made a bit of an impression, you know, that year in particular. I think, you know, just and it wasn't. I never had a plan. I still hadn't. You know, if you'd have asked me then, what you asked me 10 minutes ago, you know, what's your ambition? I didn't have one.
Yeah.
I didn't. You know, I don't know. I just was like, well, I'll just do this for a bit, and I get to see loads of bands. And I get to meet people that I found interesting. And I lived in London, and you know, I got a mobile phone, and people would ring me up and go, "Can you get this? And we're going to go and see this gig. And do you want to come? And do you want to be on the guest list?" And And I was like, "Yeah." You know, we were kind of just on the cusp of, you know, I saw Nirvana. I got to meet Kurt Cobain. And have an evening with him, you know, and he was really fucking miserable, by the way, in case anyone was thinking, what was he like? He was a heroin addict, you know, and by that point, so was I, by the way. That's why we hung out for an evening. But the way I saw the world at that point, we're just on the cusp of, you know, some band from Manchester were about to happen. And completely by accident and not at all by design, I was, I suppose, in the right place at the right time to see that from up close. And so I was at the Water Rats in King's Cross when Oasis played their first ever gig in London.
And why were you there? Were you tapped off? Did somebody say come to that gig, or were you?
Yeah, because the promoter rang me up and went, "Look, I've got a band that's driving me mad for a bit of thing. Do you want to come down and sort it out?" And I just remember thinking, I can't be asked, really. You know, and he was like, "Please, honestly." And I'd heard about them. I think I'd Fade Away on a cassette that had been released on a cassette. I'd heard a little bit about them, and you know, I mean, every week if you read the NME or the Melody Maker or Sounds or whatever, there was hundreds of music publications back then. You know, the next big thing, so Suede were going to be the next big thing a few years. Nirvana had become the next big thing already. And I went to the show thinking, if I had £1 for every time I'd gone to see a band that was going to be the next big thing, I wouldn't have had to sell drugs, you know. I'd been fucking minted. But they came on stage and I just stood there rooted to the spot, and I couldn't take my eyes off Liam, really, because you couldn't, you know. I wasn't sure whether he was going to sing or get off stage and start punching people, you know. There was a an energy to it that I'd not really witnessed before. I'd seen the Stone Roses towards the end of the 80s. That was a different thing, and I'd only seen them a couple of times, and they were a fucking terrible live band, unfortunately. They weren't, I mean, I at the time I didn't, whatever, but this was something else. This was like, right, this is happening right now. This band I'm looking at now, here's Oasis, is happening right now, right in 10 feet from me. It's like I'm right there. The Water Rats hold that room where they played. I've played there loads of times myself. Holds 200 people. It was rammed. It was sweaty as and I just remember thinking, this is our Rolling Stones and our Beatles, and where do I sign up?
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating at the start, just his attitude. You know what I mean? And it was, as you say, you didn't know what he was going to do. I think that's the unpredictability of the band in general just made it so captivating for people.
There was nothing fabricated about it. Do you know what I mean? It was real. It was a very real thing. We live in an age, I'm going to sound like an old man now, where it's like, I despair. Fucking what they call rock bands at the moment. There's just nothing. Anyway, don't get me started. But I was 24. I was the right age. I was a couple of years older than him, a year younger than Noel. I had a decent pair of trainers on my feet and a reasonable haircut, and an Adidas fucking trackie, and it was like, right, let's go. Let's join this. And so I met them, and phone numbers were exchanged, and thus began a couple of years of my life where I spent a bit of time with them.
Right, and for what I hear, you were kind of, the association with Oasis was basically for Water Rats up to around Nebworth. So what was
I saw all the good stuff.
So what was going on then? Were you with them? You weren't travelling with them all the time? Were you hooking up?
No, we did a bit of travelling. So I introduced them at the first Tea in the Park festival at Strathclyde.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
That's like 5 minutes away from me.
Yeah, so the first Tea in the Park was at Strathclyde County Park, and they were playing in the tent on the Saturday afternoon. I think they'd obviously been booked months previously, but things are moving so fast at that point. So that tent, I don't know whether it's supposed to hold 5,000 people, but there was 10, and if it was supposed to hold 10, there was 20. What I'm saying is, it was fucking heaving, man. Never seen anything like it. The energy levels were through the sky. We were all absolutely wankered on, various bits and pieces. And Marcus Russell, who was Oasis's manager, said just before they went on, do you want to go and introduce them? Get the crowd going a little bit. I mean, the crowd didn't need any geeing up, trust me. They were fucking bang up for it. There were footballs flying around and people climbing up the fucking tent poles, and it was truly a remarkable gig. The energy between audience and band, and again, I mean, we were all on a lot of drugs, but you could touch it. It was like fluid. It was like we all just became this big thing of just, I don't know, energy.
Is there any footage of that?
There's a dreadfully bad audio of. I've looked for audio for on YouTube for that Tea in the Park festival. There's virtually nothing.
Right.
I don't know why it wasn't filmed. I don't think anyone filmed them. There's a really, really bad audio recording of Oasis doing that show, and if you listen carefully right at the start, you can hear me going, "The greatest rock and roll band in the world, Oasis," and they come on, and I think they started with Shaker Maker, and I wouldn't get off the stage. Ian was like tapping me on the shoulder, going, "You need to fucking get off the stage, mate," because I was just there, just fucking go, "Come on!" Anyway, I've got a new club of laptop in, so that was and so I saw quite a lot of gigs in that couple of years hanging around with them. I wasn't, you know, I saw them at the Hacienda, saw them at the Leeds Irish Centre on that tour when at Newcastle something I was got in the crowd, there'd been a fight. I saw the hotels getting rearranged. You know, I went from a minibus to something a bit more grand than that. But by the time Nebworth came around, I sort of metaphorically shot myself in my foot a little bit, because it was common knowledge that the Cat in the Hat, because that was my nom de plume, was a junkie, heroin addict. And, you know, that's not really allowed in the music business. You're not allowed to be one of them. You can be the world's most boring cocaine addict and, you know, talk bollocks for days at a time without going to bed and no one will bat an eyelid. You can drink yourself into, you know, liver cirrhosis, and that's fine as well. But if you go near the brown stuff, unless you're making someone a lot of money, of course, then you become persona non grata really quickly.
So were you kind of then kept at arm's length for that point a bit? Or?
So going to Nebworth was on my birthday, August the 10th. The two nights they did, and I went to the first one, I think, on my birthday. And I sort of, by that point, I'd gone from being able to ring up Maggie, who was their tour manager, or Liam even, and go put me on the list, to having to sort of ring up other people and go, any chance of being your plus one. And I'd sort of scrape myself onto a guest list. Mm-hmm. And I went up there with the full intention of, you know, serving up bits and pieces, making a few quid, seeing the gig. And, you know, and I had a fucking raging heroin habit. And by the time I'd got myself in and backstage and into there was like the VIP bit, the VVIP bit, the VVVIP, you know, there were like people going to see them. I'm thinking, what? You're here for a photo opportunity, you lot. You don't give a fuck about this band. This is not it's not the band of the people anymore. And I don't want to sound like I'm bitter, right? But I genuinely think I saw the best 2 years of it, personally.
Yeah.
The Water Rats to Nebworth definitely maybe is my favourite Oasis album. It's the only one that I still listen to from time to time, and I feel really fortunate to have been around it to not in any big way, but I saw more than most, you know what I mean? And then by Nebworth, it was like, oh look, there's Tyra Palmer Tomlinson, she's on the go. It's like, what the fuck are you doing here, you know? And I think Noel Gallagher actually said we should have just called it a day then. That would have been it. That would be a perfect ending for Oasis, you know, to do that, because what happened? It's like Spinal Tap, and it's gone to 11. What happens after that?
Yeah, I think they got to a point where they just didn't know how to end it.
Yeah.
And then it just became bitter and twisted and arguments all the time.
So there was us talking about Weller, you know, a few minutes ago, and him having the integrity and the foresight to call it a day when they were the biggest band in the country. The Jam could have played 5 nights at Nebworth in 1982. You know what I mean? Probably. And it just, anyway, so they trundled on doing their thing, going, you know, in the ascendant, getting bigger and bigger. And I ended up a homeless heroin addict living in hostels and being on the street and being a deeply unpleasant junkie for the next 10 years.
Right. Well, I'm just...
Yeah.
So, obviously, the Oasis kind of times came to an end, and you say you descended into a cycle for the next 10 years, but was there still some moments in music as well? I've seen a story with Paul Weller, who sold him a bag of drugs.
Well, that was before. That was pre-Nebworth.
Right.
I mean, it's a convenient sort of pivot point in my life, Nebworth. You know what I mean? I could kind of, it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. It certainly changed things for Oasis, you know. But so I would say that prior to that, 96, right, I was just kind of hanging on. You know, I was a drug addict who had bits of money coming in, you know, in because of what I was doing. But after that, things unraveled. And like I say, by the end of 96, I'd been to my first detox, been to my first rehab. You know, neither of them had made the slightest bit of difference. And the next 10 years, from 96 to 2006, there was seven residential rehabs, 14 inpatient detoxes, trying to get off heroin, crack. I seem to, you know, the phone stops ringing. Once the word is out that this guy's a junkie, surprise, surprise, none of those people that used to ring me all the time were my friends. I knew that then. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that people liked me, but without sort of over pathologizing and self-diagnosing myself, I didn't really like myself very much.
Right.
And the life of a heroin addict, you know, of my type, as in someone that fucking, you know, cannot stop ever and will inject fucking anything that you can get in a spoon at any time of day, you know, is not pleasant. It's not pleasant for them, and it's equally not as pleasant for anyone that cares about that person. My sister, any girlfriends that I'd had or close friends, kind of got to a point where they all just had to walk away. You know, every time I could go into a detox and promising that's it, I'm done with that shit, you know, people get a little bit of hope, and then, you know, within days, sometimes hours, in fact, of completing another detox or another rehab, I'd be back in the pub or the off license, and the whole thing would start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And those were 10 long years, right? You know, 96 to 2006 were 10 fucking horrible years for all concerned. And what I mean is, you know, my family, my sister, my mum, probably with maternal instinct, knew that things weren't right. I'd like to think, or I thought at the time, that I'd kept the truth hidden from her because I never saw her. But since becoming a parent myself, you know, I know when my daughter isn't great, when things aren't right. She's a teenager now, you know. I mean, thankfully that doesn't happen very often. She's actually in good shape on all levels. But you know, there's a instinctive thing. Anyway, so that 10 years was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
A long 10 years.
So,
and I just couldn't. I guess people would say, hang on, you went to rehab 7 times, so therefore rehab doesn't work, you know, or you went detox. Those things do work, but they only work if the individual is willing to let go of their old ways of thinking and behaving.
Mm-hmm.
There's an expression which, it's a bit of a clumsy expression, but, you know, there's one thing that has to change, and that's probably everything. In my case, that was kind of true. I'm not saying it's the same for everybody, but I really had to find a different way to think and behave and live. And those 10 years was a long, slow, painful process of eventually reaching a point in 2006 where I kind of run out of bullshit, my own bullshit, and was willing to listen to other people, other addicts, essentially, who were in recovery, who had managed to stay clean for, you know, a period of time.
Right.
And for me to kind of go, I'm not actually different from them people. They might have used different drugs. They might have used them in a different decade. But if I put the timeline to one side and the substances to one side, and actually listen to how people talk about themselves and how they think about themselves and how they think about the world around them, then everything kind of lit up like a Christmas tree all of a sudden. It's like, fuck, I'm an addict. And there are various ways out of addiction, and different things work for different people. What probably was only ever going to work for me was reaching a point where I accepted that I'd have to be abstinent from all mood-altering substances, including alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of denial around my alcohol use. I was like, no, I'm a heroin addict. Booze has got nothing to do with it, which is the biggest bunch of bullshit I told anyone in my life, and I spoke a lot of it, but that was it. That fucking lying to myself about alcohol was, I laugh at it now, but it was tragic.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because the alcohol, the minute you get a bit of alcohol in your system, then that's all right. I'm going to go and get this drug, or I'm going to go and get that drug, and it's kind of, they kind of go hand in hand, really.
Yeah, my thinking just changes. Being coming out of yet another rehab or another detox, clean, sober. I'm like, right, okay, I've written down quite a lot of evidence here of what happens when I start using, and I'm just going to try and believe that now, and kind of, and then, like I say, sometimes within a few hours, sometimes it would take a few months. Eventually, I'd slide off down the pub, and anyway, like I said, that was a long, fucking painful 10 years, and nothing good came out of it. A lot of my friends died. I don't know. I don't believe in God, right? I'm not a religious person. I'm the opposite of that. But I'm also equally like, people believe what they want. It's none of my fucking business. But I don't know how I survived when other people didn't. I don't know who writes that script. You know what I mean? I think life is a game of chance. I think we get what we get. I don't think any of us get what we deserve. I don't think we deserve anything.
Yeah.
I don't think those fucking poor people in the Ukraine or deserve that, do they? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, so I survived, and in 2006, like I said, I went back to a 12-step fellowship, and I kind of literally, as they say, I kind of had my hands in the air, and I went, fucking someone tell me what to do, please. And I was very fortunate that I quite quickly got a group of people in my life that understood me better than I understood myself at that point, or probably to this day even, actually. And I just kind of did what they did. People say, what was the difference, in all those previous attempts? Because, this is the important part of my story. But I don't want to sound overly kind of important, but if you are listening to this, not you, because you're listening to it, if there's any good can come out of the sort of ramshackle nature of my life, is that other people might go, well, if he can sort himself out, so can I.
Yeah.
And I've had people tell me that over the last, nearly 16 years now. I've been clean. I've had people that I've never met, who I will never meet, who read my book, or came to see the stage show when we turned it to a stage show, or have come via the music of Hightown Pirates and discovered the backstory. And in some way, something in that story that I've told and continue to tell has been useful to them. That's when I say nothing good came out of that last 10 years, maybe that's what came out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the power to help people, the power for people to realise that there is a way out, and there's redemption for everyone. Yeah. Yeah. As I say, I spoke about my mum off mic. My mum's a recovering alcoholic. She's not touched a drink in 10 years. That's probably how I did have an argument with her this morning, because she can be a bit arsey at times. But so I understand what the struggle is, you know what I mean? Regardless of whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever, it's a mindset.
Well, alcohol is drugs, isn't it? It's just legal drugs, and it kills more people than all the rest of them put together. You know, and that's just, you know, the fucking truth of the matter. There's no two ways about it, you know. So, you know, I when I got clean in 2006, I again, by accident, not design, and I've used that expression a few times, but, you know, like I still don't have a plan. Right? You asked me an hour ago when I was a teenager, what was the plan? What was the ambition? I still don't, you know, I've never had one. I've never had a plan. But I had one plan in 2006, and that was to stay clean, no matter fucking what. No matter what, to do whatever it took. You know, after years of kind of half measures, to coin a phrase, after years of starting to sort of do some recovery stuff and then deciding that I knew best. And 2006 was as pivotal as Nebworth was 10 years earlier, or seeing the fucking Jam 20-something years earlier, or, you know, it was another, or the Smiths on Top of the Pops, or the Roses, or all these other things that happened in my life, or meeting Bez or whatever. In 2006, I was beaten. You know what I mean? I finally gave up trying to do things, life my way. And I was open to the idea that other people knew what they were talking about when they spoke about recovery and sobriety. And not only did, you know what they were talking about, but I needed to include those people in my life. And that wasn't a sign of weakness. You know, no one's ever told me that I have to do anything in recovery.
Yeah.
No one's ever put a gun to my head and said, you have to do this, you must believe that, you do. You know, there are other people's lived experience. There's a wealth of it, you know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people all over the world, millions, you know, have experience that is useful and valuable to me, and as mine might be to other people. And so I hang around with some of those guys on a regular basis, I think is the way I frame that. I did a lot of it in 2006. I went to those places where those people hang out for an hour or 90 minutes of a lunchtime or an evening. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of that. And it's stood me in good stead. And in early recovery, I just wanted to be clean. That was it. You know, the fear of going back to that nightmare existence drove me. You know, there was no bravery involved. There was no faith in anything. It was just fucking fear. And over the years, what I've got is much more than that. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But now,
yeah. So obviously, what sort of stuff were you doing? Did you start doing some work in recovery?
So I did that. Yes, I did. It's a fairly well trodden path. You know, I kind of started doing some voluntary work because I thought I knew a little bit about addiction, and I thought I might be learning a little bit about recovery. And, you know, I had a fairly long but pathetic criminal record that sort of prohibited me, and still does, unfortunately, from doing other things, because that's the society that we live in. So I had no trade, you know, I'd never learned to do anything useful in my fucking life. So I kind of started working in the treatment industry, because that's what it is. And I did that for nearly 6 years, you know, in sort of formal drug treatment, alcohol treatment. And I went back and worked in the detox that I'd been in 14 times, and worked in a couple of rehabs, and worked in statutory drug services for Hackney Council, where I'd lived for 20 odd years. And and I became a parent. You know, my daughter was born in 2008, and you know, I got her mum and I, sadly, for my daughter, got divorced. So I went through divorce, I went through homelessness, I went through, you know, having a job but sleeping in my car because that work is so badly paid and I'm financially unmanageable and blah, blah, blah. I went to more funerals than anyone my age should have gone to, you know, with friends that I'd made in recovery that died. When my daughter Tabitha was born, we had like a little sort of secular welcome to the world gathering. And there were 8 people there who were close to myself and my daughter's mum. And 4 of those people are dead now. So these weren't just people that I knew from the street. These were like people that were very much part of my life, that I loved dearly, and they're all dead. And that's fucking horrible, difficult, that grief, because it taps into all the other grief, you know. But what I've learned over the years is that, you know, feelings pass. You know, I've heard some of the most profound and useful information in my life from the mouths of people in recovery, and whether it was an original thought of theirs or something that they'd kind of heard and, you know, had their own particular way of telling it. But I've witnessed people do truly remarkable things, by which I mean people who have been completely written off by society as fucking having no hope, have stopped using and drinking and stayed stopped for a long period of time. And that in itself is truly remarkable, you know, that people are, you know, and I don't actually think there is anything more remarkable than that for a 100% addict alcoholic to fucking get clean, to get sober, to sort themselves out, to, you know, where possible, make their amends to people and to restore people's hope and to stop stealing people's peace of mind and, you know, be the parents that they were always supposed to be, or the brother or sister or auntie or uncle or whatever it is, you know, to turn up for life, to get involved, to become productive members of society. That's a truly remarkable change.
Yeah. What I find astonishing about it is that, like, for the point that you've entered into recovery, it kind of feels like it's a tougher life. Like, with all this, like, you've lost these people and you were staying in your car and things like that. I mean, it must be even more hard to deal with, and the fact that you've not got the escape of the drugs or the alcohol.
Well, that's the hard bit, because all that other stuff happens anyway in life. Do you know what I mean? Just because I decided that I was going to stop drinking and taking drugs, life doesn't get any less unfair or more fair. You know, it just, life is life. It just happens. You know what I mean? It does. Like I said just a minute ago, people, just shit happens. I really, you know, this is just me, and I respect people who have faith, but I don't have any faith in some benevolent fucking God that's keeping tabs on us and chucking us, you know, oh, he's a good boy. Look, I don't believe that. I've not seen it happen, you know. So, you know, what I signed up for was to process those feelings of loss and sadness and sit with them, you know, sit with them without fucking pouring something down my neck or sticking something in my arm. Sit with them until they change. And that's the difficult bit, you know. But what I feel I should say now, because it's been a bit heavy, is I fucking love life, man. I fucking love my life.
So
I can't tell you how, when I take the time to just check myself, right? Even something as minuscule as at the start of our conversation nearly an hour and a half ago. So if you're still listening, thank you. Because I've been rattling on for ages, right? But just, so I've discovered a new band, right? My new favourite band are called Yard Act. Have you checked them out yet?
No, I'll have a wee look after this.
They put an album out in January, right? I'm obsessed by them. Absolutely fucking obsessed. I think the guy that sings and writes the lyrics is a genius, and I don't use that word lightly. They're from Leeds. They're a 4-piece. They're not 20 years old. I mean, they're not my age, but they're a bit of a throwback to. I don't like the Fall. I'm not a big Fall fan, but there's definitely some of that. And there's a bit of half man, half biscuit. There's a social commentary. They've got great guitars, and I've just been listening to the album. I bought it on vinyl every day for like a month, and walking the dog this morning on the beach, I hear something else that I hadn't. You know, when you're just listening to something, you don't hear it all the first time. There's kind of levels. Another lyric, you just. And the lyric I heard this morning is something about what's the quickest way to reignite two lost souls. Is it therapy or car keys in the bowl? Something. I was like, fucking hell. No, I heard that lyric properly this morning, and my face was just lit up with just like, oh wow, that's fucking brilliant, you know?
Yeah.
So when I say I love life, it's not. I haven't got a guitar-shaped swimming pool here in Margate, you know. I've got an enthusiasm for the thing that saved my life when I was 11. I've got the same enthusiasm for it all these years later. But just this morning, got my ticket for Liverpool Man United in April at Anfield. You know, I've got goose. You know, I'm going to go. I haven't been to many games this season, but I've got a ticket for that sorted. You know, I took my wife. We went to Paris last week. We haven't had a honeymoon. We've been married 2.5 years. We haven't been anywhere together because of, you know, COVID and whatever. And because of some work I've done recently, as I was able to say to her, look, I just bought us 4 days in Paris. You know, and we just walked around and we just walked everywhere. We didn't take a metro or a taxi. And you know, and my daughter's great. She's Tabitha's doing really, really well. And you know, I have her here at school holidays and on weekends, and I took her to see the Libertines 2 weeks ago. Right. She's into music now, and she just gets it. You know, she's seen them a couple of times, and Peter Doherty has been kind enough to send her some vinyl, and you know, she actually had a game of Snakes and Ladders with Peter a few years ago at my house, and she was like, "He cheats, Daddy." I'm like, you know, but she's got it. She's got, you know, we're going to go and see Yard Act, this band that I'm banging on about, together in Hackney in a couple of weeks. You know, and I'll take her, and you know, it's simple stuff, really. It's not, you know, it's not like huge grand stuff. I'm sitting two feet away from a guitar that I got last week that I've been, you know, and tonight. So I'm near the end of the story. Right. So for the last 5 years, I've been writing music under the flag of Hightown Pirates, which has basically been an ongoing collection of various musicians, you know, 2 drummers, 5 different bass players, 7 different guitar players, you know, people come and go. And it's been a wonderful thing to do, and 2 albums and an EP and some standalone singles, which I believe you listened to some of that stuff.
I was listening to it again this morning, and just some of the sounds I hear for it. I mean, like the second album is like 100% bang. It starts off like the Who.
Yeah,
like the Who, don't you?
I do, yeah. Yeah, he's coming to dinner. He's coming to dinner in a minute. We'll get to him in a minute.
I thought so. But there's bits of I thought there was bits of like Bob Dylan in it as well, and there was bits that sounded like Primal Scream. So
Sunday Sermon is my nod to Like a Hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
So that song that's got that kind of hammer and gospel thing, it tells a story. So yeah. I was listening to, I mean, it's one of my favourite Dylan songs, Story of the Hurricane, and he tells a story. And, you know, so it was my nod to Dylan, absolutely, that kind of, you know, just have some simple chords, just have something going along and tell the story. So, yeah, thank you for that. And certainly some Primal Scream in there. And I guess if, you know, I didn't start recording music really until I was in my late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had all this life experience to sort of soak up. I mean, I've been in bands all my life, but they never got anywhere because I was a junkie. Do you know what I mean? So,
mm-hmm.
so I'll be this June, end of May, be 16 years clean. Right? I've written and recorded 2.5 albums already. I've sort of retired the name Hightown Pirates for a little while, because I'm going to go down a different route with musicians that are all here in Margate, where I live, which I think we might call Death Valley Yacht Club.
Yeah.
Which is a good name, I think, a snappy title. And we're having our first get together tonight.
Brilliant.
I'm going to let you in on a secret, Martin. You're going to be the first person outside of my close friends to hear this. So the plan is this, right? For if we do call it Death Valley Yacht Club, whatever. Anyway, so where this goes next musically is that you're a music fan, and I'm going to sound like an arrogant prick now, but I'm going to say it. I believe that I've written songs with the help of other people that are good enough to play Brixton Academy, to play to in front of. I think I've got the songs, right? I genuinely believe that. I've seen a lot of gigs in my time. I know it's difficult to be objective about your own music, but I think I'm quite good. I'm a bit of a purple patch at the moment. How long it lasts, who knows? But I think I've managed to write some good songs. And I've always wanted to play Brixton, and it's never happened because I've never managed to find an audience for whatever reason. So this new project is called 2 Years to Brixton. And what we're going to do, and so I've got a new bunch of musicians and some of their actors as well, and we're going to make a documentary as we go. And we're going to play Brixton Academy within 2 years.
That's brilliant.
And the way we're going to go about it is we're going to invite people, and we'll launch it all. So you have to watch our social media or my social media in the next month or so. And we're going to invite people to join our club, Death Valley Yacht Club. And you've got to pay a £5 to join, and that's a deposit for your ticket. In 2 years. And we're going to document rehearsals, and we're going to release music, and we're going to make little films, and we're going to ask people to invest in it, because right now the world seems fucking a really dark place again. You know, let's have it right. The last 5 or 6 years have been a proper shit show. Fucking Brexit and COVID, and now the situation in Ukraine. And, you know, we are, as humans, very limited in how we can affect that sort of stuff. How we respond to it is our responsibility. But I think there's a general sense of powerlessness from people. Like, you know, if I had Putin here now, I'd give him a slap. But you know what? It's not all about him. There's lots of other stuff, and I don't want to get political about it. But and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's fucking grim. So as a creative person, as a writer, musician, songwriter, whatever, show off, I feel a sense of responsibility to try and put something into the world that is positive and hopeful, however unlikely it might seem. So it seems really unlikely, as we sit here talking to each other on the 7th of March 2022, that a middle-aged man who hardly anyone's heard of can say to you, this band is going to play Brixton Academy in the next 2 years, and we'll come and do the Barras as well. Why not? Right? It seems really unlikely, right? But I believe we can make it happen.
Yeah, I believe as well, and I'm quite happy for you to play the Barrowlands. I was already trying to work out how I could sort my holidays to get down to Brixton. But if you're going to play the Barrowlands, then I'm happy with that.
Me being me and having a tendency to keep doing things that make me feel good, which for most of my life was a bad thing, but these days is a good thing. I would imagine that if we played Brixton Academy, I want to do another gig as well. I don't think I'd be satisfied with just one. Well, they say one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. So watch this space, as they say. And the thing that, you know, we're going to start a lot of social media stuff, which I'm really not very good at, but we're going to find someone that is good at it. And if we do choose that name, we're going to go with Death Valley Yacht Club. It might be something else, but you know, if people follow my personal Instagram or Hightown Pirates, whatever. And we're going to invite people to join in over the next couple of years and go, do you know what? I'll buy into that. That's a good story. That's positivity. I like that.
I think it's a brilliant idea. It's a different way of doing stuff, and I think it will catch people's attention. I think
it's pointless me putting links to my music on Facebook. No one ever sees it. You know, it's not how Facebook works. It works against you. It doesn't. But this is a different angle, which hopefully. So we'll see. So that's because one of the last questions you wrote down for me was what happens next. You know, so that's what is going to happen next. Is that over the next couple of years there'll be new music. There'll be some visual stuff. I've got a collection of creative people around here in Margate where I live, so we can get together and we can do stuff, and we're having our first get together this evening. So that's what happens next.
That sounds amazing. Obviously, just before we go into your heroes, just going back to the Libertines, just because we never really touched on that. Touring with the Libertines and obviously the surrounds. Pete, how did all that get about?
So I'll try and be diplomatic. 6 years ago, so when they released anthems for Doom Youth, I was approached by someone within the management to, how can I put it, meet Peter and see if some of what I had rubbed off on him, shall we say. And did I want to go on tour and sort of hang out and, try and build a friendship and maybe make the recovery look attractive, I suppose. And so I hadn't, I'd been doing some of that. It's called recovery coaching. And it's kind of one of the things that I do sometimes for a living, sometimes not for a living. And I'd worked with some other musicians who are currently, I think I could say, successfully have worked with them, and they're doing good stuff. And whilst I take no credit for the decisions that people make, ultimately people make their own decisions. I think when you're confronted with someone who has been where you've been, used the same substances in the same way for the same period of time, has stopped doing that and seems quite happy with their lot, then you can't unsee that.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So that was and we became really friendly, and Peter said to me, when we finish this Libertines tour, how do you fancy coming on a solo tour with him, and being the support act and bring your guitar and bring your book and read some stuff out your book and play some songs? And because being around them had made me, I hadn't played any or written any original music for 10 years at that point.
Right.
And I hadn't even really got the Libertines at that, I'd never really, they kind of passed me by because I was so entrenched in addiction when they popped up that I just missed it, and so it wasn't actually until I went to see them at the Coventry Empire, the first night of that tour, that I finally went, oh, I get it now. Now I get it, I get it. And so we went on all over Europe together, and then I joined Peter for a solo tour. And after a show in Aberdeen, up the road from you, far away, when the cows start looking strange, turn right. After a show in Aberdeen, someone came up to me and they asked, well, could they get one of the songs that I played that night? Was it available to buy? And I said, no, I've never recorded it. And they said, oh, you should. And I said, I know, but life's not like that. I'm too old and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, a few months later, they contacted me and they said, look, I'm in a position to help you. I know you're trying to help other people and you help people that I care about. And so I want to help you. And if you want to make an album, I'll pay for it.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, as crazy as that sounds. So I made a series of phone calls, like literally over the next 60 minutes. I had no band. There was no Hightown Pirates. It was just me and an acoustic guitar. And I got in touch with some really old friends of mine, and we'd all played together in various bands over the years, and some had recorded demos and others hadn't. And we got the studio booked, and we had 5 rehearsals with a band that had never played together before. We had 5 rehearsals, and then we went to the studio and we recorded the first album in 5 days. And Hightown Pirates was kind of born out of that. And once we'd finished making an album, I was like, we should maybe do some shows. And so we did a couple of shows with Peter and the Libertines, and the first album got incredible reviews, and you know, a remarkable thing to do in just a few days, because that's all it was. Then we did an EP which was produced by Youth, which never got an official release, unfortunately, but it's there, on bits of it are on, you know, available. And then the second album, which was done entirely with musicians that are sober. The last album, I'd made a decision that another friend of mine sadly succumbed to their own addiction. He was the last of the 4 people that I mentioned earlier, and it really, because I was kind of done with Hightown Pirates at that point. I tried so hard to get an audience, and just we couldn't make it happen. You know, we couldn't get people to listen to what we did, and I kind of understand why. It's like, who's this middle-aged guy that's popped up from, you know, that's not. Yeah. I don't get it. You know, it's fucking hard. It's really hard if you're 21. You know, to make an impact, to be heard in a world where, well, we've been talking for nearly 2 hours. There's probably been like 5 million albums released in the last 2 hours, you know, on Spotify or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, it's difficult. It's really difficult. I would say this, I think it's really easy being all rock and roll when you're 21 or 22, you know, but I think you actually find out whether you really mean it when you get to my age and you're still fucking doing it. Yeah,
that's a brilliant quote. That might be the best quote in my podcast ever.
Well, I fucking mean it. You know what I mean? So, anyway, so Peter has always been. Peter designed the sleeve for the first album. He was actually being interviewed by Six Music the other day. They were doing like a tour of his house in France, and he went through his record collection. He was like, "Oh, look, Neil Young and Black Honey, and Hightown Pirates," and you know, he bless him. He's tried really hard to give us a leg up, but you know, the world won't listen, to quote the Smiths album at the moment. Anyway, I owe them so much, and they were the only band actually to say that they wanted to help Hightown Pirates and our cause of, you know, waving the flag for creative stuff in recovery. They were the only band that actually fucking, them and Dodgy gave us some support slots, and so did the Libertines. No one else did a fucking thing.
Right. My mate's a big Dodgy fan, and I was texting him last night and saying, had he heard of you? Because I was speaking to you the day, and he said no, and I sent him some of your stuff. But I'm going to tell him now that you supported Dodgy. He probably realised. Our
first 2 gigs were supporting Dodgy, so you know, thanks to, you know, Andy and Matt for you know, that was fucking 5 years ago. You know, so anyway, all things must pass, and so here we are, you know, beginning of March, and you know, I've got 20, 30 new songs, you know, ideas for songs, some finished, some not. I've written a follow-up to my book, which I might just self-published this year as well. It needs a bit of fine-tuning, but essentially it's finished. It's 130,000 words, and it sort of documents what happened next bit, because my first book finished essentially in 2012, you know, when I wrote it. So that's 10 years ago. So a lot's happened, and I want to talk, you know, and I write a lot about recovery and being in a band. The publishing world seem a bit reluctant to get involved, because they want, oh, can you write some more stories about being a drug addict in the 90s? I'm like, no, I've done that. You know, I don't want to go back to that. I want to write about what happened after that, because
that's it. And end of it follows you once to read the follow up to the first book. They don't want to just have the first book rehashed to them.
So what I'm going to do is I'm probably more than likely going to publish it on a platform called Substack, which is a great writing platform, and I've got a Substack link, and I can send you all that stuff when we're ready to sort of launch it properly. And we're just going to serialize it, you know, we're just going to sort of put it up there, and you might have to pay £5 a month, you know, but that's my work, you know. So if you don't want to pay for it, fine, but you know, you can if you want. You know, I sell Hightown Pirates vinyl because that's the only way we make any money. So if anyone wants any vinyl, then I've got got quite a lot of that kicking around still. And there's going to be some new music under whatever name. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure. There'll be lots.
Stick with that Death Valley Yacht Club. That's a brilliant name. That's a cracking name for a band.
Well, unfortunately, when I Googled it, there was a band in Canada. They haven't done anything since 2015 that had already thought of that name. And I messaged them. Well, the thing is, the only thing that really changes is it sort of dents my ego a little bit because I thought I was the smart cunt that thought it up, you know. But someone else has. I still might use it. They don't exist anymore. So who knows? What they say, talent borrows and genius steals, right? I think Noel Gallagher told me that once. So anyway, I think it'd make a great T-shirt, wouldn't it? Death Valley Yacht Club. So we'll go with that. Loads more music. We had a little musical get together with a couple of people on Saturday night around mine, and then as a group of people, we're all meeting, like I said, for the first time tonight. And yeah, I you know, life in sobriety and recovery. Sometimes it's difficult because life is sometimes difficult for us all. At the moment, the world does seem a pretty scary place. What can I do? I can keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, that's brilliant, Simon. I wish you every success with this new venture. I hope it's amazing for you.
I actually think Liverpool are going to win the league as well. I think we're going to go to the Etihad in April, and I think we're going to beat Man City, and I think we're going to win the league as well.
Yeah, that should be easy enough, shouldn't it? That should be easy enough. That the other week when you were texting me, when was it? Tottenham beat Man City, didn't they? And you said they won the league wide open. I think that night I was doing a podcast with a Tottenham fan. But I had a conversation with this guy, and it was off mic, and some of the stuff he was saying, I thought, you just don't know the half of it. Like, see, like money wise, like he's a Tottenham fan, we get this stadium and we deserve to, because we get this stadium, we deserve to be higher up the league and things like that, and we deserve the money that we've got. And I'm like, well, I'm a Celtic fan, and we probably
60,000 people week in, week out. You don't actually deserve anything, do you? It's like you've got to play football.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we get 60,000 people every week, and we're not guaranteed Champions League or fuck all. So, but anyway, so I hope Liverpool win the league. They are the one team in that league that kind of look genuine.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see. Anyway. So who's coming to my dinner?
Yeah, and don't listen. Don't scrimp on the numbers. It doesn't need to be 4. You can have more than 4 if you want. There's some people have had like 10 or 11.
No, do you know what? I'm going to stick with 4. Hang on 1 second. So there was a couple of, over the course of this conversation, this chat. So the first person that I'd want to invite, and you said the word heroes. Now, she would be bored out of her tiny little mind, but I'd have my daughter Tabitha there because she is one of my heroes. I love that girl. And you know, I don't parental love for their children. I don't need to eulogize about that. People understand that. But I do. I adore she's my only child, and she's never seen me drink. She's never seen me use drugs, and I'm there for her, you know. And she inspires me massively. And I think, as I've said a few times, you know, the last few years, you know, she really became a sort of sentient human being. You know, when you're 5, you don't know anything, do you? You're just 5. You just play with your toys that are in front of you. And 6, but you know, since the Brexit and COVID and now the current, you know, problems in the Ukraine, that's quite difficult for adults who can make some kind of sense of it. You know, we have a vocabulary and a language, and if we choose, we can research the pros and cons of all those things. And make our decisions based on that. But when you're a child, even in an age of the internet, it must seem quite a scary world.
Yeah.
You know, particularly the last few years, a lot of division, a lot of polarization, a lot of uncertainty. You know, I remember being.
I think the thing with kids at that age, because I've got a 14-year-old boy, and I think a lot of the time they see through the bullshit at her. They see it better than us. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I still think, you know, we talked about when we were, or I was young, and the spectre of, you know, the Cold War and all that sort of stuff. And you know, she's making a fist of it, and she's trying her best, and she's having a go, and she's a remarkable young lady who is kind and generous of spirit and to other people. And so I'd invite her around, but she wouldn't come because she's too cool, and she wouldn't want to sit around with these people. So the other person, second on my list, would and he couldn't come because he's dead, would be Christopher Hitchens, the writer and well-known atheist scholar. And I admire him simply because, whether you share his belief system or not, I always thought he had a real dignity in how he argued his beliefs. And he afforded, for the most part, other people the dignity of their belief system as well. And he was extremely funny, ridiculously intelligent. He had a command of the English language that would leave even someone like Will Self feeling like an idiot, but never in a particularly showy way. And I remember watching the last interview with him and Jeremy Paxman shortly before he died of cancer. And Paxman saying to him, now that you know you're going to be dead in, I think, a few months' time, do you still not want to believe in God? And he said something like, why would I change my entire life's work based on fear? And I just like blew me away, you know.
Yeah.
So, I don't take that as a quote. It was something like that, you know. He said he stayed true to his beliefs, and you have to respect that. And I just think he'd be a great guest. I'd invite Bill Shankly if he were alive as well, because he's my kind of, you know, the socialism I believe in is where everyone gets a share, an equal share, and it's the way he set up Liverpool Football Club, and I think he was a remarkable human being as well, you know, and his story, you know, coming from Glenbrook and a family of 10, I think, and they all played football and they had nothing.
Came from my area as well, Bill Shankly. I'm sure, did I read somewhere, was he associated with Man United at some point, or did he? No. He played for he played for Preston for a while. You know, he wasn't. It wasn't like anyway. He just, what do they say? He made the people happy. You know, I think he had an understanding of the working class and how important football was to them, and he saw his job as a privilege. And you know, the players that played for him were privileged. And, you know, these days players aren't like that, are they? You know, they're fucking overprivileged and entitled and have, you know, so he harks back to a time of Jock Stein and Matt Busby and all those guys that. Yeah. And that leads back to what I said earlier about Liverpool and how they're like the most genuine out of these clubs in the league. And that the genuineness comes from people like Bill Shankly that have built that over the years.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that. But yeah. I mean, I go to the game a lot. I spend a lot of time in Liverpool. I remember coming out of when we beat Barcelona 4-0 and taking the train up to go up, and I had mates taking the piss, going, fucking, what are you doing, wasting your time going up there? You're never going to beat Barcelona 4-0, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, as Shankly once said, you know, if you don't support us when we lose, don't bother turning up when we win.
Yeah.
And meeting all my mates in a pub we go in, the Thomas Frost, just by Anfield before the game. And there was this kind of gallows humour, you know, and Scousers do that better than anyone, in my opinion, you know, of kind of like, What if they score? Oh, then we'll have to score 5. Oh, fuck it, we'll score 5 then. Yeah. I don't think anyone that I sat with anyway in the pub before the game, hand on heart, was like, well, we're going to go and do fucking Barcelona 4-0. You know, and no one really believed that. But there was an optimism of it, like, fuck it, until it becomes impossible, we'll believe, right? So, and I think that comes as much from people's struggle with Hillsborough, you know, and that ongoing and still, you know, unresolved search for justice, and I won't say retribution, justice, you know, it still hasn't happened and may never happen. And you see that in you know, in all working class communities, actually, and particularly port cities, I think, where people have grown up with an influx of immigrants and the benefits of that. And, you know, people are just generally softer at heart. They're harder because they have to be, because of the lives they have, but their hearts are softer, I think, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so obviously the game, we won it 4-0. And so the fellow that was stood next to me, I say stood because none of us were sat for very long. I don't know if you cast your mind back, but that night Barcelona were wearing this sort of canary yellow strip, their away strip. It was kind of like a green luminescent thing. And he said to me, we go 2-0 up, and he turns to me and goes, fucking hell, lad, if you squint, it's like we're playing Norwich. And then it gets to 4-0, and he turns around and goes, I fucking told you, we're playing fucking Norwich.
Yeah.
And I just, anyway, Bill Shankly, he's coming. I'd have to invite Pete Townsend because I think it was either Townsend or Weller, but I've met Weller and I've met Townsend once very, very briefly for like literally 2 minutes, but I spent quite a lot of time with. I've had dinner with Paul Weller. It didn't come on a plate, put it that way. It was a long time ago. But I genuinely, I think, as a songwriter and a lyricist, Pete Townsend is as much of a genius as Beethoven was, or Mozart, or fucking Leonardo da Vinci, or Michelangelo, or any of these people, or, you know. And I'm aware I'm just talking about loads of blokes here, by the way, and if Tabitha was sat next to me, she'd be going, what about Maya Angelou, and what about Marianne Faithfull, and what about Debbie Harry, and you know, but we're going to talk about football, you know, anyway. So I'd have Pete Townsend, and with as much humility as I could muster, which isn't much at the best of times, I'd kind of thank him really for just inadvertently, obviously, giving me something to hold on to in those really dark years of my childhood, for writing songs that were angry, that expressed what I had no capacity to express, but resonated with me.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say to him. So that's 3 people. I put Tabitha down, but said she wouldn't come. So actually, I'm gonna invite a woman. I'm gonna invite Marianne Faithfull, because I bet she's got some amazing stories. And in fact, I know she's got some amazing stories. I was listening to Broken English, an album from the 80s by her during the other day, and it's a fucking great album. It's a really, really good album. And, I just think she'd keep us all in check. You know what boys are like when you've got. It's why I always try and have women in the band.
Right.
It just kind of all the fucking puerile dick jokes all kind of stop, or the women actually tell them, and they're much better at it. It just kind of keeps us in check a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
too many guys, and it turns into a fucking school ground, doesn't it?
It's a primary school, you know. So so that would be it. It would be Christopher Hitchens, Pete Townsend, Bill Shankly, and if she'd come, we should have to come because it's a fantasy dinner, isn't it? Marianne Faithfull.
Brilliant.
And I would. So I was going to try and sound like I'm some sort of decent cook. I can cook 3 things quite well, and all of which my wife's taught me. And she taught me one thing, which is it's baked salmon. So you get a salmon fillet, and then you cover it with pesto, green or red, depending on what you like, and then you sit it on a row of green beans, slice a lemon, put the lemon on top of it, you wrap it all up in tin foil, and you bung it in the oven for 25 minutes, and then you serve it with spinach and rice, and you feel like you can run around the world 50 times. It's really good for you. I don't think Bill Shankly would eat it, so I'd have to do like a roast chicken for Yorkshire pudding and loads of gravy.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I might cook that tonight.
It's really good. Really good. I mean, look, for someone that spent the first half of his life sticking fucking shit into his system all day, every day, I've tried in the latter part of my life to try to, I don't smoke or vape. I'm far from perfect with what I eat. I walk a lot. I cycle. I do little cycle tours down here in Margate. I want to keep making music, Martin. I want to. I think I'm getting better at it, not worse. And I want to stick around. And I want to stick around and watch my daughter grow up. And I want to be there for her. And if she decides to get married to whoever, whatever, when she's a bit older, I'd like to be there for that. I really would. We'll see.
Well, definitely. And you're kicking about for the next 2 years anyway, because we're going to see you at Brixton in the Barrowlands.
Well, exactly. So there you go.
So it's been a pleasure speaking to you today, Simon. I'll post all your links. I'll post a link for your book on Amazon and wherever else you can get it. I'll post that. I'll post a link for your Facebook. Is there anything else?
So I do. So Hightown Pirates is on Twitter and Instagram, which is probably a better place to get me than Facebook, to be honest, because if you post anything. So if you just Google Hightown Pirates Twitter, Hightown Pirates Instagram, you can get links for that. And if people want to follow me, then I can send them links to Substack when I start doing the book. And if they want to buy any Hightown Pirates vinyl, then let me know.
Cool. Pleasure having you on.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Time for Heroes podcast. If you would like to get in touch, the best way is on the Facebook page, Time for Heroes podcast, or on Instagram at Time for Heroes podcast, or Twitter at Time for Heroes P1, or drop me an email at timeforheroespod@gmail.com. You'll find Time for Heroes on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Google and Amazon. Please leave a review where you can, share with others, and more importantly, enjoy.